Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with my colleague Daniel to talk a bit about how UBS is looking at AI and analytics and how we want to make this applicable to our business as a bank. First, we will talk a bit about how we organize ourselves for that. And in the second half, if we still have time, we would like to give you a specific example and show you how this looks like in the real world. But first of all, let me start with a quick look back into the past. And I would like to give you a few quotes on what people look to used to see, how they used to see the future of AI. And I think what's interesting to see is that in the beginning, the quotes were kind of general, kind of open-ended, you could say. And obviously, it was hard to figure out where this would go. But obviously, you can see there were the big ideas in the room already. A lot has changed since then, obviously. Today, Alexandra talked about this a little bit in the opening keynote in the morning. But what is easy to see today is the public awareness has been massive. Everybody is reading about this in the papers every day. My parents have an opinion on it and argue with me on it. That's a complete change, and this has been in the last few years only. And on the business side of things, there has been a similar change. And in the past, it used to be more about, should we look at this? Is this something that can help our business? And at that point, I think that question has been answered. And right now, the expectations on the business side are very specific and very real. And so the questions that we see today are more on the side of how can we do more of the same? And how can we be faster? And it's a bit in that spirit of doing more and doing things faster that we would like to show you how we try to deal with it and how we try to organize for that. And like many others did as well, we launched a Center of Excellence to kind of focus our efforts in all of that data and analytics space and bring together all the experts and professionals that are needed for that to make progress and make progress fast. And the way we designed the Center of Excellence is closely aligned to our strategy in data and analytics. So basically, we want to have the right data in the right quality. We want to make sure that we build up analytical capabilities so that we can run use cases that create value right now. We want to invest in the right technologies that will help us to run analytics on a very professional level. We want to do more self-service reporting on a large scale. We want to be very sure and have a really clear view on how to use data responsibly. Of course, in line with all the laws and regulations, but for us, even more importantly, in line with the expectations and the views that our clients have. And one of the most important aspects, people. We want to make sure that we create an environment that attracts the right talent, keeps the right talent, and kind of engages everyone who is somehow part of this greater data and analytics community, no matter if it's on the business side, if it's on the IT side, which is a pretty big group. So we don't really have a lot of time, so I cannot talk about all of this in detail. There are many interesting stories, I think, to be told. But instead, let us pick a few individual things that we think are interesting to look at, so we can at least spend some time on that. So one of the topics is analytics and scale. And this is especially important for, let's say, companies who are at an intermediate maturity level in analytics. And I think this is where many of us are at the moment, actually. This is where we're faced with the challenge to kind of move into a setting where we can run analytics at an almost industrialized level, at scale. And at scale, that has a lot to do with doing more things, doing more at the same time. And sometimes this has also something to do with growing a team. And growing a team, imagine what if you had to grow your team by a factor of 3, or by a factor of 10, or even more. It's not so easy. And I'm sure many of you have seen these pictures with the perfect description of this is what a data scientist should look like. The data scientist, kind of the unicorn, the thing to look for. And the perfect data scientist, should know everything about the data, should know all these latest AI techniques, should know all the business problems and the business domain itself, and in the best case, should also be able to explain really difficult things to some management stakeholder who is really far away from these topics in very simple terms. And this is really difficult to do. And so what we've seen, I mean, if you find these people, that's great, and please keep them. And if you can hire additional ones, go for it. We've just seen that it's really difficult to find these people. And so in addition, you don't always have the luxury to just wait until you find these, because they're really hard to find in the market. So sometimes you have to find a different solution. Data scientists, that's just one example. Another example would be if you have a business owner, someone who's not really fluent in analytics. In the best case, they might have a solid understanding of what's going on, and they might even have a long-term view on how to build this up, but it's certainly not granted. And these are examples that show a bit that you cannot always rely on the perfect resource. And the approach that worked well for us is to not just wait for the perfect people to arrive, because you won't be able to scale up in that case, but to define specialized roles for dedicated tasks. And what do I mean with that? So basically, if you do that in the right way, if you look at the skill set matrix, on the left-hand side, if you do that right and the setup is right, then all the strengths and gaps that you might have across the team, they will complement each other, and in the end, you should find kind of the perfect coverage across the team. And maybe more specifically, I think some of the roles are pretty well known, but what has been kind of a big step in the journey that we did is the introduction of new roles. And one new role that we introduced is the role of an analytics translator, which is kind of who's responsible to make sure that the business experts are well aligned with analytics experts and that the whole team is kind of running towards the same goal. And in addition, have a bit of a long-term view on how to develop capabilities and skills so that you will actually get better over time. Another example is the role of a data engineer, I think, which is more common in the market already, where the idea is that kind of the critical thing to make sure that you have the data ready in the right quality. Doesn't matter if it's for the end user, if it's for a data scientist to use. This is a critical and complex task, and it deserves its own specialized role as a data engineer. And of course, many data scientists will be able to cover a lot of that as well. But if you pack that into a specialized role, you will also be able to attach additional things like making sure there's a focus on automation, on standardization, and so on. So in the end, the idea is to make sure that you split the whole thing into dedicated roles, which will help you in the specialization, depending on the skills, sharing a bit the load, balancing the load, and also being able to scale up quickly if need be, because you don't have to find the perfect person in the end. That's an example for how to organize to be able to actually grow and to scale up. Another example, that's more about how to accelerate, how to be quicker, how to speed up. And the typical thing to do, I think, when you start out is you come up with a list of use cases. I compiled a typical list here that you will find in the banking industry usually. And then you can start to run these use cases, and this might be a good thing to kind of just try out new things and see if use cases that you might have read about or heard about, if this works for your business, for your data, for your clients. But it is kind of just one view, and the game changer for us has been here, that we didn't just look at use cases, but we introduced an additional dimension, if you will. A long-term view on how to develop capabilities. And the idea of capabilities is that once you build a capability, this should help you with several use cases in the end. And it might take some time, but you should have a long-term view over several years that will allow you to build on top of what you just started out with. So maybe to make a quick example, natural language processing, I think, is a good example, because NLP has so many flavors to look at. And if you just start out with a single use case, it might be really hard to have the full picture in mind and invest in the right technology, start with the right skill set. And in that case, I think that's a good example where it makes sense to have a long-term plan, a long-term roadmap of how you want to build up these NLP skills. You might start out with a really basic case, but keep building on top of that. And in the end, you will end up with some strong capabilities that will even enable more advanced use cases that you might have planned for in the beginning. So our solution to this problem is this. In addition to having a use case roadmap, make sure you have a kind of orthogonal capability roadmap in place, execute it as rigorously as you do with the use cases, make sure it has the same visibility, bake it into your investment stories to make sure that you get funding for capabilities as well. And if you do that right, in the end, you should be able to speed up your use case execution because you can build up and reuse capabilities from the past. So much about doing things, doing more of the same things and doing things faster. And let's now turn to a specific example to show you how we are working in these kinds of projects.
Thank you very much. You know, UBS offers a wide variety of products to its clients, such as mortgages, credit cards, or pension products. But today I want to talk about investment products and investment solutions. To be more concrete, we want to understand the client's investment needs and offer the right clients advice from an investment specialist. And the question is, can we devise a predictive model which helps us to do so? The first thing we want to do when setting up a predictive model is have the target population right. And so let's talk about the left-hand side first. We want to learn from the past, and for that, we're going to collect target clients. And how do we do that? So let's pick a month in the past, indicated by the blue square here, and collect for the cohort of all clients which have received investment specialist advice in that month client history. We repeat that process as shown in the graph up here to receive a sufficiently large number of target clients. Client history, why do we need client history? The obvious answer to this is if we just base our model on static information, such as gender or age or domicile, we don't going to have enough predictive power in our model. That's why we take 12 months of client history. And why 12? We don't want to be unintentionally misled by changes in the spending patterns which come seasonally, like, for example, before summer vacation or before Christmas time. So 12 months, in fact, gives us a nice setting to come up with a model. And by the staggered collection of data, we will not only have a good model with enough targets, but we'll also have the setup to generalize. That is, we don't need remodeling month over month, but we'll have like a model which can be used for rescoring. And then you have seen maybe this yellow square there, the lag month. Speaking about scoring, we all know that as data scientists, we will get present-day information with a few days or weeks of delay. And this month of latency has to be built into the model when developing the model as well as when preparing data for scoring. So much for the left-hand side. But what is turned out to be very important is that we have targets of the right quality. And what do I mean by that? Imagine you want to offer credit cards to your clients. What do you think would be more appropriate? Selecting clients who have purchased a credit card, or selecting clients who have purchased a credit card and started using it regularly? So you see where I'm going to. In our case, it's important that we will have in the target selection clients who have enough assets to invest and who have shown also the will to do so. And the way we have selected in that staggered approach led to the following distribution. We basically see that the clients in the target selection already start at a higher level of, for example, assets here, and they also monotonously increase the assets even before seeing the investment specialist, but as you can see on the upper quartile, also beyond that moment. So with that setup, we can have a good chance of getting a good model in the deployment and production phase. The next important topic, obviously, is feature extraction, feature generation. I talked about the 12-month client history, and in the banks, we have a whole wealth of information, such as account balances, credit card information, turnover of credit card, payment transactions, client contacting history, and et cetera, et cetera. And if we have all that wealth of information and if we feed it to a traditional machine learning model month by month separately, it's obvious we're going to destroy the temporal pattern, and basically we're going to lose the behavioral fingerprint of every single client. On the other hand, if we look at deep learning, these algorithms have the capacity to reproduce or represent temporal patterns. But the question is, are those methods also suited for the problem at hand with very short time series? For many years at UBS, we have taken another road, and actually a pretty simple and yet surprisingly effective way. We represent these short time series by distributional parameters, and we look at correlations of those features over time. And to make a simple example, the most straightforward way would be to say, I want to look at the state the client is in before the event, or actually before the lag and then the event. But then you think, wait, how did the client come into that state? Did he increase his assets or did he decrease his assets? So then you might think, okay, I'm gonna fit some linear trend or some simple model into that time series, which, however, can be a bit tricky if you have like extreme values, or it can also be very costly in terms of computational time. So we have come up, for example, with additional ideas like looking at the difference in median between the first and the last 3 months. And I've listed a couple of more. So we basically have over a dozen of simple parameters for every single feature, be it payment transaction or be it account balances, et cetera. And with that, we basically get a wealth of data which describes the behavioral patterns of our clients pretty well. Before I skip to the next slide, let's maybe shortly talk about modeling approach. Not only in Kaggle competitions, but also in our case, XGBoost has yielded very convincing results, and I'll show that later on. And the practical advantages we have seen or had with that approach is XGBoost handles mixed data types elegantly, also missings, is robust with respect to extreme values. And also, even on modest hardware, it runs pretty fast and doesn't require a lot of hyperparameter tuning. So looking at the success of what we did is the next thing. XGBoost here, for example, outperformed a support vector machine approach. And when we're looking now at what we do, we can say a campaign success if we get fewer leads, a higher precision, and better conversion rates. If you ask different people, like an investment specialist, a marketeer, or a data scientist, they might answer the question about success or metrics very differently. But if you want to have an application which is successful in business, we have to put ourselves into the shoes of the business person. This is the investment specialist. And he will ask the question, how many good leads will I get out of a list of 10 clients? And it makes clear it's not about overall model accuracy that we have to care there, but about model precision. The results you see here, they show that our approach was able to reduce the number of leads by 80% and yet increase the conversion rate by about a factor of 3. On the left-hand side, it's like in the model development cycle on independent test data, but on the right-hand side, it shows the productive deployment of our model in Switzerland. Okay, so for this, maybe one last comment about things which have been mentioned in different talks today. It's okay and very important to have good predictive models, but we also want to be able to have models which make sense and which can be explained and also explained to non-expert. And we are all used, for example, to look at the global variable importance of the model on the left-hand side. As data scientists, we need to do that. We can also deep dive with methods like Lime or DALEX and find the main drivers at an individual client level. But both views won't help like the investment specialist or the practitioner. He needs to know why the client is on the list maybe, and he wants to have like a couple of talking points. And what, in our experience, was always very successful or brought a project to success if we put in extra time in designing client fact sheets, which pull together a lot of intelligent information for the investment specialist to approach the client. And obviously, this again will need, from the data science point of view, a lot of business knowledge, which we have heard before, and it's worth investing that time to make really a project to come to success. So I hope with that simple use case here, you've seen a bit how not only in abstract terms we set up the team and we go about with a roadmap, but also how in concrete terms we work on cases, on a case-by-case basis. And so I think the next thing is already the Q&A. I'm done.
Thank you, first of all, Michel and Daniel.